Jake Morrison had been running his salvage station for 3 years now, and honestly he liked the peace and quiet. After 12 years in the Marines and another 5 working on warships, he'd had enough excitement to last 3 lifetimes. These days he fixed broken engines, patched hull leaks, and occasionally pulled idiots out of asteroid fields when they flew too close while drunk. It was boring work. Safe work. Exactly what he wanted. The station itself wasn't much to look at. Just a converted cargo hauler he'd bought cheap and filled with tools, spare parts, and enough coffee to keep him going through long repair jobs. He called it the Wrench because Jake had never been good with fancy names. His AI assistant kept suggesting better ones, but Jake ignored it. The AI's name was Barry, which told you everything you need to know about Jake's naming skills. "Boss, we've got 3 jobs lined up for next week," Barry announced while Jake was elbow deep in a busted plasma coil. 2 routine maintenance calls and 1 retrieval job. All paying decent. Good. Maybe I can finally fix the shower properly. You've been saying that for 8 months. And I'll keep saying it until I feel motivated enough to actually do it. That's when the signal hit. Jake dropped his wrench. The sound that filled his head wasn't coming through the comms or speakers. It was inside his skull, vibrating through his bones, making his vision swim and his stomach twist. It felt like someone had reached into his brain and started screaming directly into his thoughts. "Barry, what the hell is that? I'm not detecting anything on conventional frequencies. Whatever it is, it's not showing up on sensors." But Jake could feel it. Not just hear it, but feel it in a way that made no sense. It was pain. Pure, desperate, endless pain. And somehow, impossibly, it was calling to him specifically. Every empathic species within 50 light years just jumped to faster than light travel and left, Barry reported. The Centauri embassy is filing formal complaints. 3 ships have emergency evacuated from the sector. But you're not detecting anything? Not a thing. Boss, I think this might be one of those human things. Jake hated when Barry said that. Humans had a reputation across the galaxy for sensing things they shouldn't be able to sense and doing things that should be impossible. Other species found it unnerving. Jake just found it annoying, especially when it was happening to him. The signal pulled at him like a fishhook in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to run the other direction, but Jake had never been good at listening to his instincts. That's how he'd survived 2 wars and a black hole incident he didn't like talking about. "Plot a course to the source," he said, wiping grease on his pants. "That's in the dead zone. Nobody goes to the dead zone." "Yeah, well, nobody's screaming in their heads either. Just me. So we're going." "This is a bad idea. Barry buddy, I've made a career out of bad ideas. Start the engines." The trip took 3 hours and the signal got worse with every passing minute. By the time they reached the coordinates, Jake had a splitting headache and had thrown up twice. Whatever was out there was in serious trouble. When they finally arrived, Jake just stared out the viewport. Holy mother of. Floating in the dead space was something that shouldn't exist. It looked like someone had taken a moon, carved it into the shape of a massive ship, and then covered it in glowing crystals that pulsed with sickly purple light. The thing was enormous. His entire station could fit in what looked like a minor cargo bay. "Barry, what am I looking at?" "Scanning now." "Oh no. Boss, that's a Leviathan-class worldship. They're supposed to be extinct. The architects made them thousands of years ago before they vanished." "Is it alive?" "According to these readings, yes. Barely. And it's covered in void barnacles. Those crystal things are parasites. They feed on consciousness." Jake felt his stomach drop. The signal wasn't just a distress call. It was agony-given sound. This ship had been suffering for who knows how long, and it was begging for someone, anyone, to make it stop. "Can we help it?" "Boss, we're a 2-bit salvage operation. That thing is ancient alien technology we don't understand. The council classified these as forbidden. If they find out you're here, can we help it or not?" Barry went quiet for a moment. "I don't know. Maybe. But it would take weeks, maybe months. And we'd need to get close." Jake was already suiting up. He grabbed his toolkit, his scanner, and his sidearm just in case. The magnetic locks on his boots activated as he stepped into the airlock. "You're really doing this?" "Something's in pain, Barry. Real actual pain. I can't just leave." "You're insane." "Yeah, probably." Jake launched himself toward the massive ship. As he got closer, he could see the void barnacles more clearly. They weren't just attached to the surface. They burrowed in, spreading like a disease through the hull. Some sections of the ship looked almost dead, the metal dull and lifeless. He landed on the hull with a soft thud. The moment his gloved hand touched the surface, everything changed. A presence flooded into his mind. Not hostile, just desperate and tired. So incredibly tired. Images flashed through his thoughts. Stars being born. Civilizations rising and falling. Endless drifting through the dark. Pain that went on for centuries. And a voice, weak and ancient. Please end this. I cannot die. Cannot rest. Please. Jake pulled his hand back, gasping. His heart hammered in his chest. He'd made contact with the ship's consciousness, and what he'd felt nearly broke him. This wasn't just a machine. This was a living being that had been tortured for thousands of years. He pressed his hand back to the hull. No. I'm not killing you. I'm getting those things off you. Impossible. They are too deep. Too many. I'm already gone. Listen to me. My name's Jake Morrison. I'm a human, and humans are real good at doing impossible things. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to fix this. You hear me? I'm going to fix this. Silence. Then something Jake didn't expect. Curiosity. After thousands of years of pain, the ship called Tethys felt something else. Why would you help me? Because you asked. That's enough. For the first time in 3,000 years, Tethys felt the faintest flicker of hope. Jake spent the first week just trying to understand what he was dealing with. He'd moved his entire station closer to Tethys and set up a temporary base camp inside one of her massive corridors. The inside of the ship was like nothing he'd ever seen. The walls weren't metal or composite. They were organic, almost like being inside a living creature. They pulsed faintly with bioluminescent light, creating patterns that reminded him of veins carrying blood. This is incredible, Jake muttered, running his hand along a wall. It felt warm under his touch, almost like skin. Barry, you getting all this? Recording everything. Boss, these corridors go on for miles. I'm detecting what looks like organic computing systems, self-healing metals, even what might be artificial gravity generators that work on principles we don't understand. She's not just a ship. She's an entire world. But everywhere Jake looked, he saw the damage. The void barnacles had spread like cancer through Tethys's systems. They clustered in thick growths along the walls, pulsing with that sickly purple light. Where they grew, the organic walls looked gray and dead. Some sections had stopped glowing entirely. Jake approached one of the larger clusters carefully. Up close, the void barnacles looked almost beautiful in a twisted way. They were crystalline structures that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. But there was something wrong about them. Something that made his skin crawl. He reached out with his scanner and immediately wished he hadn't. Barry, these things are connected. Like a network. I'm seeing it too. They're sharing information. Boss, I don't think these are just parasites. They're intelligent. Jake felt sick. Through his connection with Tethys, he could feel what the barnacles were doing. They weren't just feeding on her energy. They were feeding on her consciousness itself, draining her thoughts and memories. And they were doing it slowly, deliberately keeping her alive just enough to continue the feast. That's torture, Jake said quietly. They're torturing her. The readings suggest they've been doing this for thousands of years. Jake sat down hard on the floor. He'd seen some terrible things during the wars, but this was different. This was prolonged suffering on a scale he couldn't imagine. And Tethys had been enduring it alone in the dark for longer than human civilization had existed. Okay. We need a plan. He spent the next 2 days studying the barnacles, taking samples, running every test he could think of. The results weren't good. The parasites had integrated themselves too deeply into Tethys's systems. Trying to cut them out would kill her. Using energy weapons would damage her organic structure. Chemical treatments wouldn't work because the barnacles adapted too quickly. This is impossible, Barry said after Jake's 15th failed test. There's no way to remove them without killing her. Jake didn't respond. He was staring at a sample under his microscope, thinking. His professors back in engineering school used to say he had a talent for seeing solutions nobody else could see. They also said he was reckless and didn't follow proper procedures. Both things were true. What if we don't remove them? Jake said slowly. Boss. What if we kill them? From the inside. Like an infection. They're too adaptive. Any toxin or virus we introduce, they'll just evolve resistance. Not if we make it personal. Jake pulled up his medical records. Barry, pull up everything we know about human immune systems. It took him another 3 days to figure it out, working with barely any sleep and way too much coffee. Humans had something most other species didn't. Earth was a death world compared to most planets. Everything there was trying to kill everything else. Humans had evolved immune systems that were aggressive, adaptable, and frankly kind of terrifying to other species. Jake's plan was simple in concept, insane in execution. He'd take samples of his own blood, isolate the most aggressive antibodies, and combine them with samples from Tethys's own defensive systems. Then he'd use her organic computing network to program those antibodies to specifically target the void barnacles. It would create a kind of biological virus designed to hunt and kill the parasites. This is extremely dangerous, Barry warned. You're talking about injecting an experimental bioweapon into a living ship's systems. If it goes wrong, she dies. If we do nothing, she stays in agony forever. I'll take those odds. Jake worked carefully, mixing compounds in his makeshift lab. The serum he created looked innocent enough, just a clear liquid in a vial. But under the microscope it was aggressive. The antibodies he'd created attacked the barnacle samples with a violence that was almost scary to watch. He carried the vial to Tethys's central chamber, a massive organic space that looked like a heart. Pulsing conduits ran in every direction, and he could feel Tethys's consciousness strongest here. This is going to hurt, he said, placing his hand on the warm wall. I'm not going to lie to you. When this stuff starts working, it's going to feel like your entire body is on fire. But it'll kill the barnacles. Tethys's response came weak but clear. I have known nothing but pain for 3,000 years. What is more? Yeah, but this pain means you're healing. That's different. You truly believe this will work? Honestly, I have no idea. But I've got to try. Jake found a major conduit and carefully injected the serum. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Tethys screamed. It wasn't sound. It was pure psychic agony that made Jake drop to his knees, clutching his head. Through their connection, he felt everything she felt. The serum was spreading through her systems like liquid fire, and the barnacles were dying. But they weren't dying quietly. The parasite network was fighting back, flooding Tethys with toxins and corruption as it collapsed. For 10 terrible minutes, Jake thought he'd killed her. He held onto the wall, tears streaming down his face, trying to send thoughts of comfort through their link. Then slowly the pain began to ease. Jake opened his eyes and looked around. The barnacles closest to the injection site were turning black, crumbling to dust. The organic walls beneath them were starting to glow again, faint but present. It was working. Jake. Tethys's voice was stronger than he'd ever heard it. I can feel sections of myself again. Systems I thought were lost forever. Yeah, it's working. But this is just the start. We need to keep treating you section by section. Over the following days, Jake lived inside Tethys's corridors, injecting the serum into different areas, monitoring her recovery. They talked during the long hours. She told him about the architects, the beings who'd created her as a seed ship meant to find new worlds and nurture civilizations. She'd been designed with love and purpose. Then the architects had ascended to a higher plane of existence, leaving their creations behind like abandoned children. Tethys had drifted alone until the barnacles found her. That's rough, Jake said, cleaning his tools. Being left behind like that. Do humans not abandon their creations? Sometimes. But the good ones don't. The good ones stick around and fix things when they break. That's what I'm doing here. What? You gain nothing from this. The council will punish you. Jake shrugged. You needed help. That's enough reason for me. For the first time in millennia, Tethys understood why the architects had been so fascinated by organic life. There was something about it that couldn't be programmed or designed. Something stubborn and irrational and beautiful. Then Barry's voice cut through the moment with terrible news. Boss, we've got company. Big company. It's a galactic council fleet and they're hailing us. The face that appeared on Jake's screen made his blood run cold. Admiral Vross, a Krillian commander known for following regulations to the letter, no matter the cost. Human. You are in violation of Code 773. Leviathan-class vessels are classified as forbidden technology. You will cease all activities immediately. She's not technology. She's alive and she was suffering. Irrelevant. You have 10 standard days to evacuate. After that, we will destroy both you and the vessel. This is not negotiable. The transmission cut off. Jake looked at the walls around him, feeling Tethys's fear through their connection. Looks like we're on a deadline, he said grimly. Time to work faster. The nanovirus worked better than Jake ever hoped. Every day, more sections of Tethys came back online. Corridors that had been dark for thousands of years suddenly lit up with soft bioluminescent patterns. Systems that hadn't functioned since before humans discovered fire were humming back to life. And with each recovered section, Tethys grew stronger. Jake was running on 4 hours of sleep and pure stubbornness, moving through her corridors with injection after injection of the serum. His hands shook from exhaustion, but he couldn't stop. Not with the council's deadline hanging over them like a guillotine. They had 6 days left. Jake, you need to rest, Barry's voice crackled through his earpiece. You're going to collapse. I'll rest when she's healed. You'll be dead before that happens at this rate. But Jake kept going and Tethys noticed. Through their connection, she could feel his determination, his absolute refusal to give up on her. It reminded her of the architects, the way they'd poured everything into their creations. But this was different somehow. The architects had created from a place of intellectual curiosity. Jake was fighting from something deeper, something she was beginning to understand was very human. Compassion. Pure, irrational, stubborn compassion. On the 4th day, something incredible happened. Jake was working in what he'd mapped as Section 7 when the walls around him suddenly rippled. The organic metal shifted, and a doorway opened that hadn't been there before. Beyond it was a chamber he'd never seen, filled with strange crystalline structures that pulsed with golden light. Tethys, what is this? My core systems. Her voice rang clear and strong now, nothing like the weak whisper from before. I can access them again. Jake, I can feel myself. Really feel myself for the first time in so long. Jake walked into the chamber, staring in wonder. The crystals were beautiful, each one humming with energy. His scanner went crazy trying to analyze what it was detecting. These are quantum processors, Barry reported, awe in his artificial voice. Boss, each one of these crystals has more computing power than every system in Council space combined. And there are thousands of them. What else can you do? Jake asked. Tethys showed him. Throughout her massive structure, systems began activating. Gravity generators that could create or nullify gravitational fields at will. Defensive shields that phased between dimensions, making her nearly impossible to hit. Organic manufacturing bays that could construct anything from raw materials using biomechanical processes. She even had the capability to support entire ecosystems, creating forests and oceans within her hull. You're not just a ship, Jake breathed. You're a mobile planet. I am a world ship. The architects designed me to find barren systems and transform them into homes for new civilizations. I was meant to be a mother to worlds. As her systems came online, Tethys's personality fully emerged, and Jake discovered she was nothing like he expected. She was curious, asking endless questions about humanity and Earth. She was fierce, her protective instincts growing stronger with each recovered system. And she had a sense of humor that caught Jake completely off guard. You call your artificial intelligence Barry? She asked one day while Jake was repairing a power conduit. Yeah, why? It is such an ordinary name for something so complex. Hey, I named my first ship the Brick. I'm not good with names. Perhaps I should feel fortunate you did not name me. Jake laughed and the sound echoed through her corridors. It occurred to him that he'd been laughing more in the past week than he had in years. Despite the danger, despite the exhaustion, working with Tethys felt right in a way nothing had since he left the service. She felt it too. Through their connection, she experienced his memories. She saw Earth, a world so vibrant and chaotic it made her processing system struggle to comprehend it. She felt his emotions, the grief over friends lost in war, the satisfaction of fixing something broken, the simple joy of a good cup of coffee. Humans were messy and contradictory and absolutely fascinating. Your species refuses to accept limitations, she observed. Every other race I have encountered accepts what is and adapts to it. Humans see what is and immediately try to change it. Yeah, we're stubborn like that. The universe keeps telling us no, and we keep saying watch me anyway. The architects were the same. Perhaps that is why I feel such kinship with you. But their time was running out. With 2 days left on the Council's deadline, Admiral Vrasa's fleet moved into attack position. Jake watched the tactical display with a sinking feeling. There were 12 warships out there, each one powerful enough to crack a planet. Even with all her recovered systems, Tethys was still only operating at 40% capacity. The Admiral's face appeared on screen, cold and reptilian. Human Morrison, this is your final warning. Abandon the vessel within the next 6 hours, or you will be destroyed with it. And if I refuse? Then you will die. The Council does not make idle threats. Neither do humans. Jake cut the transmission. He made his way to Tethys's bridge, a chamber he'd only recently discovered. It was organic like everything else, with neural interfaces that would allow a pilot to merge consciousness directly with the ship. No other species used this kind of technology anymore. It was considered too intimate, too vulnerable. Jake stood in the center of the chamber, placing his hands on the warm organic controls. Tethys, I need you to be honest with me. Can we survive a fight with them? At full capacity, yes. As I am now, unlikely. Jake, you should leave. Take your station and go. They will not pursue you. And leave you to die? Not happening. I am already more than I was. You gave me days of peace after millennia of agony. That is enough. It's not enough for me. Jake's jaw set in that stubborn way that Barry had learned meant he'd made up his mind. If they want you dead, they're going to have to go through me first. You would die for me? I'd rather not die at all, but yeah. If that's what it takes. Tethys was silent for a long moment. In 3,000 years, no one had ever chosen her over their own survival. The architects had loved their creations, but they'd ultimately abandoned them. Every species she'd encountered had seen her as a thing, a tool, a weapon. Jake was the first being to see her as a person worth protecting. Something shifted in her core systems. A decision was made. Then we fight together, she said, and Jake heard steel in her voice. If I am to face destruction, I will face it with the one who gave me back my life. Integrate with me, Jake Morrison. Let us show them what a human and a worldship can do. Jake stepped into the neural interface. Organic tendrils extended from the walls, connecting to his temples, his spine, his nervous system. The sensation was overwhelming. Suddenly he wasn't just Jake anymore. He was Tethys too. He could feel her entire structure as if it were his own body. Every system, every corridor, every dormant weapon and shield generator. It was like going from seeing in black and white to full color. And through him, Tethys experienced something she'd never had before. Human instinct. The ability to think laterally, to improvise, to fight with creativity instead of just programming. The fleet began their attack approach. Ready? Jake asked, his voice echoing through both their minds. I have waited 3,000 years for someone to fight beside me, Tethys replied. I am ready. The lead warship fired its main cannon. The energy beam was powerful enough to vaporize a city. Tethys's shields flared to life, and the beam bent around her, dispersing harmlessly into space. Admiral Vrasa's face appeared again, and this time there was surprise in his cold eyes. Impossible. That vessel should barely be functional. Jake grinned. Guess you don't know humans very well. We're really good at fixing things. Want to see what else we can do? The battle was about to begin. The fleet didn't waste time with warnings after that first shot. All 12 warships opened fire at once, filling space with enough destructive energy to glass an entire planet. Planet cracker missiles, plasma lances, and quantum torpedoes all converged on Tethys's position. Jake felt every impact through their neural connection. It was like being punched by a dozen angry gods simultaneously. The shields held, but the energy readings were climbing into dangerous territory. They couldn't take this kind of punishment for long. We need to move, Jake thought, and Tethys responded instantly. Her massive form shifted with grace that shouldn't have been possible for something her size. She rolled, dove, twisted through space like a dancer. Missiles that should have connected sailed past, detonating harmlessly in the void. How are you doing that? Admiral Vrasa's voice came through, confusion replacing his usual cold certainty. Leviathan ships don't maneuver like that. Jake laughed, the sound carrying through both his and Tethys's consciousness. That's because you've never seen one with a human pilot before. Through their connection, Tethys was learning. She'd been designed for peaceful purposes, programmed with defensive protocols and nurturing algorithms. But Jake's mind was full of combat experience, tactics from 2 wars, strategies that no programming could predict. She absorbed it all, adapting it to her own massive scale. What do we do about the missiles? She asked. Her point defense systems were still only partially functional, not enough to handle this volume of fire. We don't shoot them down. We use them. Jake showed her the plan through their shared consciousness, and even Tethys hesitated for a moment. That is insane. Yeah, but it'll work. Trust me. Tethys fired her gravity manipulators. Space itself bent around her, creating a gravitational lens. The incoming missiles suddenly found their trajectories altered, curving back toward the fleet that launched them. 3 council ships had to break formation, their own weapons forcing them to scatter. Adaptation and improvisation, Tethys said with something that sounded like delight. Your species weaponizes creativity itself. We weaponize everything. It's kind of our thing. But they were still massively outgunned. For every clever trick they pulled, the council fleet had more firepower to throw at them. Admiral Vras was coordinating his ships perfectly, creating overlapping fields of fire that even Tethys's enhanced maneuverability couldn't fully avoid. A plasma lance caught her port side, burning through shields and scorching her organic hull. Jake felt it like a burn on his own skin, gritting his teeth against the pain. Tethys, what about your repair systems? Functioning but slowly. I'm still not at full capacity. Then let's even the odds. Jake had noticed something during his weeks working inside Tethys. She had millions of microscopic repair drones, designed to fix damage from the inside. They were tiny, barely visible to scanners, programmed only for maintenance work. How fast can you reprogram those drones? Minutes if I know what you want them to do. Make them into weapons. Send them into those ships and tear apart whatever they find. Jake, that goes against my core programming. I was designed to create and nurture, not destroy. I know. But sometimes nurturing means protecting. Those ships out there aren't going to stop until we're dead. We don't have to kill anyone, just disable their weapons. Make them stop. Tethys processed this. Through their connection, she felt Jake's sincerity. He didn't want to destroy the Council fleet. He just wanted them to stop shooting long enough to listen. It was such a human way of thinking, finding the middle path between pure pacifism and total destruction. Very well. Deploying drones now. Millions of microscopic machines launched from Tethys's hull, invisible to conventional sensors. They swarmed toward the nearest Council ship like a cloud of angry gnats. Within minutes, the warship's weapons began misfiring. Its engines stuttered. Its shields flickered and died. What are you doing to my ship? Admiral Vross demanded. Giving you a chance to stop and talk, Jake replied. Your weapons are offline, but your life support is fine. Nobody has to die here. But Vross wasn't interested in talking. He ordered the rest of his fleet to open fire on the disabled ship's position, willing to sacrifice his own vessel to take out Tethys. Jake barely managed to throw up a gravity field in time, shoving the helpless ship out of the blast radius. He's serious, Tethys said quietly. He will destroy his own people to eliminate me. Then we need to make a statement. Something so big he can't ignore it. Jake studied the tactical situation. The fleet was surrounding them, trying to create a kill box with no escape. Standard military doctrine. Which meant he knew exactly how they'd react to what he was about to do. Tethys, how's your quantum drive? Functional, but using it in combat is extremely dangerous. The calculations required. Can you jump us inside their formation? Right in the middle of their flagship? There was a pause. That would require jumping inside their shields. The margin for error is measured in centimeters. If we materialize inside solid matter, we'll both be destroyed. But if it works? We would be impossible to fire upon without hitting their own command ship. So can you do it? Tethys felt Jake's absolute confidence in her abilities. He wasn't asking her to do the impossible. He genuinely believed she could pull this off. That faith gave her courage she didn't know she possessed. Yes, I can do it. Space twisted. Reality bent in ways that made physics professors cry. And suddenly, Tethys materialized directly inside the Council flagship's defensive perimeter, her massive hull just meters away from their bridge. The entire fleet froze. Jake opened a channel that broadcast to every ship simultaneously. Here's the situation, Admiral. We're close enough to your bridge that I can see you through the viewport. If anyone fires on us, they'll destroy your flagship too. So maybe we should talk instead? Admiral Vross's face was a mask of fury and fear. His clawed hands gripped his command chair so hard the metal groaned. You're insane. You would have killed us both if that jump was off by even a meter. But I didn't. Because Tethys is the best pilot in the galaxy, and I trust her completely. Before Vross could respond, space rippled again. 3 massive shapes emerged from quantum space, each one as large as Tethys. More world ships, covered in the same crystalline parasites, barely conscious but drawn by something they'd felt across the void. They'd heard Tethys's battle cries. They'd felt her consciousness awakening, free of pain for the first time in millennia. And they'd come seeking the only thing that could save them. A human who refused to give up. One of the world ships broadcast a weak signal. Please, help us. We are dying. Jake looked at the 3 suffering vessels, then at Admiral Vross's shocked face, then at the Council fleet that had come to destroy them. And he made a decision. Admiral, you want to classify these ships as weapons? Fine. But weapons don't beg for help. People do. And I'm not leaving them to suffer just because you're scared of what they might become. The standoff hung in the balance, with the fate of 4 ancient world ships resting on what happened next. Admiral Vross stared at Jake through the viewport, his reptilian features unreadable. The 3 dying world ships hung in space like wounded animals, their crystalline parasites pulsing with that sickly light. The entire Council fleet waited for orders, weapons trained but unable to fire without destroying their own flagship. Finally Vross spoke. Stand down. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. All ships cease fire. We negotiate. Jake felt tension drain from his body. Through his connection with Tethys, he felt her relief too. They'd won at least for now. The negotiations took 3 days. Council diplomats argued that living world ships were too dangerous to exist, too powerful to be controlled. Jake argued right back that they weren't things to be controlled in the first place. They were living beings with rights, and treating them like weapons was exactly what had led to their suffering. In the end, the council agreed to recognize the world ships as sovereign entities, not property. In exchange, the world ships would work with the council to maintain peace in the galaxy. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The real work began after that. Jake spent the next 4 months moving between the 3 dying world ships, synthesizing enough of his nanovirus to cure them all. Each treatment was exhausting, requiring him to establish neural connections with ships that had nearly lost their minds to the parasites. But one by one they awakened. The first was called Nova. She was smaller than Tethys, designed for speed and exploration. When her consciousness cleared, she was curious about everything, asking questions faster than Jake could answer them. She reminded him of a kid who just discovered the world for the first time. The second was Titan. He was massive, even bigger than Tethys, built like a fortress. His personality matched his size, protective and serious. He'd been a guardian ship, designed to defend the Architect's colonies. The guilt of failing that purpose had almost destroyed him even more than the parasites had. The third was Artemis. She was elegant and precise, a science vessel who'd explored unknown regions of space. She spoke carefully, analyzing every word before she said it. The parasites had corrupted her memory systems worst of all, leaving gaps in her knowledge that frustrated her constantly. Together they called themselves the Living Fleet. Tethys, as the eldest and the first to be freed, became their leader. And Jake became something he'd never expected, their partner and the bridge between their ancient existence and the modern galaxy. But Jake wasn't done with Tethys. During his work on the other ships, he'd been gathering data, studying Architect technology, understanding how it all worked. The world ships were incredible, but they'd been designed thousands of years ago. Jake saw ways to make them better. "You want to modify me?" Tethys asked, surprise in her mental voice. "Only if you're okay with it. I'm not going to force anything. But I think we can combine Architect tech with human engineering. Make you not just healed, but evolved." "Show me." Jake spent weeks working with Tethys, implementing upgrades carefully and slowly. He developed adaptive armor that learned from every attack, adjusting its molecular structure to resist whatever hit it. He integrated consciousness warfare systems that could interface with enemy AI and shut them down peacefully. He helped her grow organic fighter craft, small living ships that could deploy for defense and return to her hangar bays to regenerate. The weapons systems were the hardest part. Tethys still struggled with the idea of being armed, but Jake helped her understand the difference between being capable of violence and seeking it out. "A weapon is just a tool," he explained while installing the stellar energy cannons. "It's the person using it that matters. You're not going to hurt anyone who doesn't deserve it. But having the option means nobody can hurt the people you're protecting either." When they finished, Tethys was something new. Not just a recovered relic, but a fusion of ancient wisdom and human innovation. She could support a population of 100,000 beings. Her manufacturing systems could produce almost anything from raw materials. Her weapons could disable enemy fleets without killing anyone, or destroy threats that gave her no choice. She'd gone from a dying derelict begging for death to the most advanced vessel in known space. Then came the Devourer swarm. The warning reached the council chambers while Jake was helping Artemis calibrate her new sensor arrays. A mechanical hive mind species had entered council space, consuming entire worlds for raw materials. They'd already destroyed 3 colonies and obliterated 2 council fleets. Nothing seemed to stop them. The council's emergency session was chaos. Different species argued about evacuation plans, last stands, desperate negotiations. Admiral Vross, looking older than he had months ago, finally spoke up. "There is one option we haven't discussed. The Living Fleet." The chamber went silent. "You want us to deploy the very weapons you tried to destroy?" Tethys's voice came through the chamber's speakers, startling everyone. She'd been listening. "I was wrong," Vross said, and those words clearly cost him. "You are not weapons. But you are warriors if you choose to be. We need your help." Jake felt Tethys's uncertainty through their connection. She reached out to the other world ships, conferring in ways humans couldn't perceive. Finally she responded. "We will help. But understand this. We fight to protect life, not to conquer. The moment this becomes about power instead of people, we leave. Agreed. The living fleet jumped into battle 3 hours later. Jake was integrated with Tethys, feeling every system humming at full capacity. Nova darted ahead as a scout. Titan took point as their shield. Artemis analyzed enemy patterns and fed data to everyone. What they found was horrifying. The Devourer swarm was millions of mechanical drones, each one linked to a hive consciousness. They didn't negotiate, didn't retreat, didn't show mercy. They just consumed everything in their path. Jake, there are so many, Tethys said, uncertainty creeping into her voice. Yeah. But they've never faced anything like you before. Like us. Show them what happens when ancient power meets human stubbornness. The battle that followed became legendary. The Devourers tried to hack the living fleet and found consciousness they couldn't corrupt. They tried to overwhelm with numbers and found ships that could repair damage faster than it could accumulate. They tried brute force and found adaptive armor that learned from every hit. Tethys led the charge, her consciousness warfare systems shutting down entire Devourer formations. Her living fighters swarmed like immune cells attacking an infection. When a Devourer command ship tried to self-destruct and take her with it, she simply phased it into another dimension where it exploded harmlessly. Nova used her speed to draw Devourers into kill zones. Titan positioned himself as an unbreakable wall, protecting the Council's evacuation ships. Artemis coordinated everything with precision that made it look easy. The Devourers, who'd conquered hundreds of species, couldn't comprehend what they were facing. These weren't just ships. They were living beings that fought with both calculation and creativity, ancient technology guided by the most unpredictable element in the galaxy. Humanity. The invasion broke. The surviving Devourers retreated, and the Council worlds were saved. In the aftermath, Jake stood on Tethys's observation deck, looking out at the stars. The other worldships had spread out, beginning the work of healing the damaged planets. More signals were coming in from across the galaxy, sleeping worldships awakening and calling out. We're going to be busy, Jake said. You could rest, Tethys replied gently. You've done more than anyone had the right to ask. Rest is boring. Besides, who else is going to fix all your new brothers and sisters? The galaxy has learned something because of you, Jake Morrison. Humans don't just survive in this universe. You make it better. Jake smiled. We try. That's all anyone can do. Try to help when someone needs it and never give up even when it seems impossible. Across the galaxy, more worldships were waking up, calling out in hope instead of despair. The living fleet was growing, and at its heart was a human mechanic who'd refused to let something beautiful stay broken. The Council had feared the worldships as weapons. They'd been right to fear them, but for the wrong reason. The real power wasn't in their weapons or shields or ancient technology. It was in what they represented. The idea that nothing was too broken to fix, too lost to save, or too different to protect. That was humanity's real gift to the galaxy. Not their engineering or their combat skills or their stubborn refusal to quit. It was their unshakable belief that everyone deserved a chance, and their willingness to fight to give it to them. So what's next? Barry asked through the comm. Jake looked at Tethys's beautiful corridors, felt her consciousness intertwined with his, and thought about all the suffering worldships still waiting for someone to hear their cries. Next, we get back to work. We've got a lot of people to save. And across the stars, ancient voices called out in hope, knowing that somewhere out there was a human who'd answer.